Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation about private equity, building businesses, and maybe have a conversation about tequila. Arturo, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Josh. Happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what are you up to?
Sure. So the nuts and bolts of it is I bought and sold for my own account using my own resources over 55 businesses across 18 industries. Now, I did have corporate experience prior to this or in between my entrepreneur ventures. I did do a stint in Wall Street for a little bit. So I got to see deals from that angle and also was a managing director at KPMG and their financial advisory services. But really, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I buy businesses. I buy independent of the industry, and we can talk about that a little later in deal criteria. But I pretty much look at any deal. If it's a good deal, I buy, and I invest my capital. Sometimes I don't, but I'm always have skin in the game.
Yeah. So skin in the game, that's important, right? Tell us why you say, and I always have skin in the game. Why is that important? And what should people out there be wary of if someone's not willing to do that?
Yeah, so having skin in the game means that you're actually going to be not absentee, not passive investor. You're going to somehow or other be involved in the business, right? The level of involvement, the depth of involvement, is to be determined depending on the deal. But if you don't have skin in the game, you're probably not going to be do what you need to do in terms of creating value for the business purchase. There's no incentive.
Mm-hmm.
So skin in the game to me, it's either capital, it's either time, it's other resources that I use from a strategic standpoint, or all of the above.
Very good. All right. So how did you even get into the game buying, 55 businesses, personal capital, and, you always have skin in the game in some way or form. Like, how did you get into this world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. Kind of like most people do. First, I had the entrepreneurial itch when I was 21, 22, when I decided to launch a tequila brand, which we can talk about that a little later. It's a great story. And like any entrepreneur, I started at a young age with a lot of initiative, a lot of ambition, but absolutely no experience. And so my first couple of ventures just went downhill. And I kept at it. Went into the corporate world, then came back, kept at it, and then it suddenly struck me: why am I starting these businesses from scratch? No processes, no management, no product or service accepted by the marketplace, having to figure everything out, this swamp of never-ending tasks to see if it's going to be a successful venture. Why not just let somebody else do that? And if they fail, no harm, no foul to me. But if they succeed, then I bypass that startup risk. I bypass the emotional, financial time toll that it takes to start a business. And I have cash flow now. I have management in place. I have infrastructure. I have processes in place. It just seemed like a better proposition. What I realized was that most of the time, it's actually costing me less financially than had I started it from scratch. So less risk and sometimes less capital. Once I bought my first business, there was no stopping me. In fact, I have a book out there, and not to plug it or anything, but it talks about buy yourself into entrepreneurship. Everyone, most people want to be an entrepreneur. There's the hard route and there's the easier route, which is the one I propose.
Okay. All right. So talk to us about building the tequila company, right? So walk us through like why you did it, what went wrong, what did you learn?
Sure. So originally I'm from Mexico. And this was around, I'm going to reveal my age here, but back in 1993, 1994, where they just signed this historic deal called NAFTA, right? And so Mexico was now, every industry was now open to private investment from abroad. And part of NAFTA was they gave the tequila industry the denomination of origin, which is key. And a friend of mine had access to one of the factories So the tequila industry capped the manufacturing capacity so that, tequila wouldn't be depressed in terms of price, right? And there's a 33 or 35 factories. Well, one of these factories, 4 of them were inoperable. They were in the middle of the jungle with, trees, growing in between all the equipment and just some crazy stuff. And he had access to one of those. And we were able to buy it for pennies on the dollar. And we didn't want it because we were going to invest in it. We had no money. We wanted it because it gave us a license to manufacture tequila, right? Because you had to, without the denomination of origin, you had to produce tequila in one of these 35 factories or manufacturing facilities. So then that gave us an in into tequila. So we thought just because of that, we had made it, right? Little did we know that we had to create a brand and then go out and compete, find customers and compete with the big boys like Jose Cuervo, Herradura, Salsa, and many, many others. And so we created an amazing brand. I had a partner that came out of Procter & Gamble, my age. We created an amazing brand. We created an appraising tequila. So it's one of these tequilas where you can drink in a cognac glass. So from a marketing and a product standpoint, and even a pricing standpoint, we were doing everything right. However, because we were doing everything right, we kind of came into the radar screen of Jose Cuervo. And by the way, we know the family very well, but business is business, right? And we had $50,000 to our name between 4 partners, and we put it, 45,000 of that into marketing. And we had bought spots, again, this is 1994, so when you buy spots on TV, there was no internet, none of the stuff we have today. So we bought spots on MTV, ESPN, our target market, and we were going to, knock it out of the park. And when we launched the campaign, instead of those spots running in where they were supposed to run, meaning 9 p.m., 8 p.m., around the time where our target market was listening, they ran at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, because our competitors basically said, give us these time slots because we are who we are, and anybody else, kick them out, knowing that they were going to kill us. Huh. And, overnight, we went from this aspiring dream to bankruptcy,
Yeah.
And that was our foray into the tequila industry and into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Right. Lost all our money. Our brand, by the way, you could still buy it at, all these little tourist places in Playa del Carmen, Puerto Vallarta, because we actually made noise in the industry. We had a great brand, a great product, but of course we didn't have the muscle, and we had complete naivete as to, we could just waltz in there and create this tequila empire, right?
Yeah. So let's just say you and I went back to hang out with the younger version of yourself, and we're looking at, before you throw the money in on ads on MTV and such, but we could have a chat with your younger self. Like, what would you do differently in that tequila business?
Wait, get experience. Wait. We didn't have perspective. We didn't have context. So even before we were hit hard by our competition, we were selling. We were in certain liquor stores in Mexico City, certain department stores that sell alcohol in Mexico City, but we didn't know if our pricing was correct. We had no context. We'd never sold a product. We didn't know if we were paying our employees correctly or training them correctly, or doing the operation from the supply side correctly, because how would we? We had zero context. So we at the beginning, we started losing money in the first batches. And we didn't know that till we saw the bank account. And again, it's going back to sourcing your bottles, your labeling, your the tops on the bottles, and among other things. We had some client complaints at one store. We had no idea how to handle it. So anywhere you looked at it, we had no experience. So there's absolutely no winning in starting and putting your capital into a venture where you have no experience from a business standpoint, forget the venture, whatever the idea may be, get the experience and then launch the idea. Because now you're going to have context, now you're going to have perspective, now you're going to have points of references, now you're going to have mentors, now you're going to have all this wealth of information and knowledge that you didn't have before, so you don't make those naive mistakes that we did.
Yeah. All right. So you closed down the shop, and Jose Cuervo took market, and they're doing pretty good, right? So they take market share. And now when you're hanging out with the family and the conversation comes up about tequila, who would they say is the best tequila? Would they say you guys did had a good round, or?
Hell no. Heck no. Heck no. Jose Cuervo is the best tequila. And by the way, they have some of the best tequilas, right? They have a broad array of products, so a lot of credit to them. But no, this is our competition, even in private, they still make the best tequila around.
Yeah.
Very
cool.
It's kind of like BMW admitting Mercedes is better, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. All right. So from there, what did you do? You're in Mexico. You just closed down the business. What happened?
We started 3 more. We started an import-export company. We started importing of smaller appliances, household appliances, because again, this goes back to, you're a young kid and you have so much ambition. And so we had a contact in Colombia that fabricates appliances. And because we thought we had a contact, we thought we had a business. And so we got the contact and we started importing the appliances. We actually did very well. We did very well from the beginning. And then again, competition came in and crowded us out. We launched a discotheque for the wrong reasons. I'm 23, 24. I wanted to have the best table at the best nightclub in Guadalajara, Mexico. And that's why I put my money there, which I borrowed, by the way. And I partnered with somebody else who never came up with his money. But we were opening this nightclub in a certain location in the heart of downtown Guadalajara that we were, in hindsight, very privileged to have gotten. And it created a lot of buzz. So when my partner didn't come up with his capital, we had no capital to finish the build out. So I did some wheeling and dealing, talking to some other families and, entrepreneurs, and I was able to convince them to buy into the nightclub because of the vision and because of the location. And I sold my partner's participation, kept 51%, got my money back in the sale, and had them operate. How I did all that to this day, I don't know, Josh. There's a big thing in business, called luck. Obviously, being in the right place, having the you don't give up. You knock on as many doors as you need to knock on. But I got lucky, and that venture made me a lot of money. Yeah. And from there, I started another venture, and then I started buying businesses.
Nice. So, all right. So here you are. You just failed the tequila company. You're starting a few other ventures. One's getting gobbled up by competition. You start a nightclub, maybe for whatever reasons, right? But you started a disco, a nightclub, and you find out that you're short on capital. So now you're asking people, they've seen some of the successes and the failures that you've had, and you're asking them for money. How did that go? Talk to me about what was going on in your head and the conversations you had when you were asking for money.
Sure. So I think what they saw was a hardworking kid, right? And I stress kid, but a hardworking kid. He was relentless. He was ambitious. He had a vision, right? I didn't talk about my failures. I talked about my future successes. So the ability to sell oneself. And I pitched numbers, and I pitched, if this happens, these are the returns. And I was able to do that, I think, in a very succinct and serious way that they took me seriously, and they bought into the vision. And remember, they operate other restaurants or nightclubs, so they know the business. And I had done my homework. It's not that I Yes, the driving force was to have the best table in the nightclub. Of course, that's just the immaturity of me. But I wasn't going into it blindly, right?
Yeah.
I did my research, I did my homework, I tried to understand why nightclubs make sense. I understood the money, I understood the finances, and they saw that, and they validated it internally, and they bought in, and they made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I made a lot of money. They made a lot of money as well. You
Was
know,
that the first, was that the first business or deal that you did that you actually made a lot? Like you went from, we had a failure here, we made some money here, but was that the first big win for you?
yeah, that was a home run.
That was
So the export import company, we exported electro appliances from Colombia, but we also exported canned spices from a very famous manufacturer and brand in Mexico to the Dominican Republic. Again, because we had a contact there. I forgot who had the contact. And so those did well. They weren't by any means home runs. They paid the bills. They gave me a little money, gave me and my partners a little money, but they weren't failures. There were successes, small successes. The nightclubs were home runs.
Yeah.
This is where you doubled your money, tripled your money, quadrupled your money in a very short period of time. Because then eventually we sold the nightclub, and so more money came in. Because nightclub, are fashionable businesses. They go up and then they plateau, and then they tend to wean off, and so you got to sell it at a good time, and we did. And now I had money. I went and got my master's, my MBA. Went to Wall Street, and during Wall Street, here I am making a lot of money. This is late. This is late '90s,
Ooh, .com.
99.com, and I jumped ship. I was at Lehman Brothers. I had to give back my signing bonus because they were so pissed at me that I jumped ship. But I went out and raised money to launch a .com business in the logistics field in Latin America. And we raised $10 million in VCs, Merrill Lynch, CVC, which is Citibank Venture Capital Latin America, and a small Silicon Valley fund called Explorador Fund. And before we knew, we had 5 offices in 5 different countries in Latin America, 6 counting one in Miami, which was more of a marketing. Miami was supposed to be the Latin America Silicon Valley, right? And so that went very well until it didn't, right? So we were on our second raise, 45 million. We had commitments from our initial investors, CVC, Merrill Lynch, not Explorer Fund, but the big guys, to not to lead the round, but to maintain their participation. And then the .com bubble burst. We were in logistics, so we were powering a lot of the e-commerce stores that were popping up. Right, we were you had the payment provider, we were the logistics provider, so we helped deliver their packages. And so that's something you can take offline. And we did, and that's how we survived while all our clients were, disappearing, literally overnight. We were actually featured in CNN in Espanol and Spanish for being a success story for not going under.
Yeah.
We were able to sell the company. We made our investors whole, which to me was absolutely necessary. Even though we controlled the company, we had 70%. I had 3 partners. They had super minority veto rights on, so they really controlled the company on the macro level, so to speak. But we had the lion's share, so we could have, when we sold the company, we could have pocketed the money, and I convinced my partners that your name and your future is going to be more important than taking their money. So it turned out to be a success story for not going under. It's just kind of telling signs of the time, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it was similar, you had the .com, and then you had the same kind of incident with real estate for me, it started in 06, right? Same kind of thing. If you could survive it, You were considered a champion, right? If you could just survive the tough time.
Correct.
Yeah. So from there, you've bought 55 businesses. Like, how did you sold that business and you go, it's time to get back in the game. Did you take any time off?
No, I
You
took
know,
a break. Yeah, no, I mean, in a matter of 2 years, we went from a business plan, an idea, a business plan, to raising $10 million, to expanding this company in 6 different countries, to then, putting the brakes on, winding it down and selling it. I lived on a plane, so I was exhausted. My idea of vacation or time off was to get 2 more master's degrees. So I did that, went back to Boston. And then after Boston, that's when I said, you know what? Why don't we start buying businesses? And that's when, the deal making and the purchase, the acquisition, took front stage, and no more startups.
yeah,
And I haven't looked back since.
very cool. So how'd you go from Boston? I think you're in Texas, right? You're in Houston.
Correct.
How'd you go from the north to the south?
Well, I went back to Mexico, bought some businesses there. And for security reasons, back in 2006, 2007, when the Mexican government was, declaring an all-out war with the cartels, that kind of spilled into society, and we started seeing, not nice things, and we started feeling not safety. We decided to move, and I had 2 daughters, a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, and we're like, what's the closest place to Mexico City from an airplane, from a plane ride? Because my family was in Mexico. And again, that's when you're moving, all this stuff, because you have babies, right? And you travel not light, very heavy. And so Houston was an hour and a half away, and we came here, bought an oil and gas company, and have been here since.
Yeah. All right. So when it comes to buying businesses, right? You mentioned, you could bypass the startup risk, you could buy cash flow. Sometimes it's actual less capital of buying something that already has traction or is moving. If something, let me ask you a question. If someone has that kind of business, why would they want to sell that if they
Sure.
have
No,
something that works?
that's a great question. It's kind of, you come from the real estate side. It's like asking you, why would someone sell their home, right? If you're getting it for such a good deal in your mind, or why would someone sell that apartment complex for that? Well, there's 100 different reasons, right? They get a divorce, they want to downsize, they're retiring, there are health issues, there's no succession plans, they're tired, the business is not doing well, technology has surpassed them. There's just a lot of reasons why people sell businesses. And now more than ever, the baby boomers are selling the business. I mean, it's the best time to buy businesses, because these baby boomers are in their, what I call in their exit phase. Most likely it's retirement phase. But they have they don't necessarily want to sell, or have someone to sell to, or have heirs. So they don't know what to do, right? And so it's a great time to buy a business done correctly, because you can have a win-win type of scenario with these types. And we're talking about probably over 70% of small businesses right now are in the hands of 55 years and older.
Yeah.
So 7 out of 10 people are already thinking about their exit strategy. Some of them may not pull the trigger, but they're already thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. So when you approach a business, right? Let's talk about acquisitions. You bought 55 of them, so you've got some experience buying businesses, right? What's the process that you take to identify what kind of business you want to buy, going through the process of submitting an offer, letter of intent? Like, what's your process?
Yeah. I have a very, very specific process. In fact, I have a program where I teach this very same process that I use to this day. So one is, you have to understand your deal criteria, right? That's the utmost important thing, because there's going to be parts of the business that are going to come into conflict And so you have to prioritize what's most important to you. What's most important to me is going to be very different from what's important to Josh, to John, to Peter, et cetera, right? In my case, because I bought so many businesses across so many industries, I'm now industry agnostic. So I don't care. I look at people, I look at processes, and I look at product. First thing I look at is it priced correctly, right? Because most of the time when it goes through brokers, nothing against brokers, but they may be higherly priced than they should have been if the market priced them. And you see that later when they sell or don't sell. So the first thing I look at is it priced correctly? And I'm not looking to get a steal here. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not the objective. It's just, is it priced correctly at the right multiple? And if it is, then I start looking at the longevity of the business, because I want to buy stable cash flow. I'm done with buying, restructuring companies or, companies that are failing to resuscitate them. It's kind of like a startup game. There's too much risk involved and not necessarily a higher reward to compensate for the risk, right? The risk reward is not there. So I look for longevity. Has the business been around for a long time? Has the management team, whether it's the owner or the management team with the owner, have they been around for a long time? And if those check, then I'm interested.
Okay. Right.
Then I start and I knock on the doors and I go meet with the seller. And I normally do this proactively outside of business hours. Because the more I can talk to a seller one-on-one, the more rapport I have with the seller. And we don't necessarily talk about price. To me, price, I look at it to see if it's in the price range, right? But then structure is more important to me than price. I'm willing to pay a premium for the right structure. And a lot of people don't talk about this. They talk about price. But I would rather buy a business that is financed by the owner, that is financed by the assets, with good financing, right? With the right transition in place, and pay maybe 5, 10, 15% more than come out of pocket with an SBA loan.
Mm. Yeah, I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. Kind of go into the why is that important?
Well, again, if not everyone has a lot of money to buy businesses, right? And you don't want to tie up your capital in businesses because these are not necessarily that liquid, right? It's you buying a house. There's a very liquid market out there. Buying a business, there's still a liquidity out there, but the process is longer. It could take a couple of months to sell a house. It could take many months or years to sell a business, right? And so I don't want to necessarily use up my capital. So if I could have many elements of financing, whether it's owner financing, whether it's asset-based lending, whether it's bringing on an investor, whether it's bringing on a hard money lender, whether it's bringing on employee financing and giving them a percentage in the company, whether it's earnout, where an owner will delay. It's not owner financing. Will delay part of the purchase price if certain KPIs are met. So all of that does not use up my capital, right? So it lowers my risk, doesn't tie up capital, so I can do more deals.
So you could do more. Now, one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, man, you say you're industry agnostic or business agnostic, right? Like for buying something, it's like, am I buying myself a job? Like, who's going to run this thing? Or like, how much time is it going to take to make sure that my money comes back? How do you approach those questions?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that goes back to price. So I was very, when I mean price, and I mean the multiple that I'm buying that business for, right? So the price, the multiple is determined by price and cash flow, free cash flow, right? So how that free cash flow is determined, there's a lot of things that are called add backs, right? Is the owner operating the business? So is he paying himself a salary or herself a salary? Or do I have a general manager? right? If the owner is paying himself a salary, then I'm going to have to hire a manager because I'm not going to be doing the day to day, which means the free cash flow goes down. And so now that multiple goes up, right? Less cash flow, same price, multiple is higher, right? So when I talk about price, I mean, I look at things like that, right? So I don't, I don't buy businesses to, operate the day-to-day activities. I can't. At any one time, I have 4, 5, 6 businesses. I'm very, very busy, but not running the day-to-day operation. So I've had restaurants. I'm not taking orders, right? Now I've had to do that because it's my business, and that's again getting back to the skin in the game, right? But you have a management team in place, and the pricing still has to make sense. And there's a lot of good businesses out there that have that infrastructure because they're a little larger, and because they're larger, they're able to hire. They need more infrastructure in terms of management or employee base, and so the owner is less important. And now, now you don't have to be a hands-on day-to-day operator.
Yeah. Is there a certain like benchmark that you look for? What business is too small for you to buy, and what's that sweet spot once it passes maybe this financial milestone, or what's that point where you're like, now the business is valuable to you?
It's not. There isn't a number, because we've bought businesses that are doing $70,000 in profit or free cash flow, and we've bought businesses that is doing 700,000 in profit and free cash flow because all the other criteria meet. They check the box,
Yep.
right? So that $70,000 business in cash flow, might be, might have sold for 2.5 times multiple, right? And that $700,000 might have sold for 2.7 or 2.8, so very similar multiples. And both of them had infrastructure, so they had management in place. So they're both good businesses. So I'm going to dedicate the same amount of time. Now, here's the catch, though. If I am going to buy that $70,000 business, and I'm going to spend the same amount of time as a $700,000 business, there better be some upside.
Yeah.
So the caveat to buying a smaller business is scalability. Is me being able to scale that business, taking it from 70,000 in net profit and free cash flow to 200, 300, 400, right? Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. If it's just going to stay at $70,000, then it's not that interesting because it's going to take the same amount of time as running one that's $200,000 or $300,000. Right, same amount of resources, same amount of everything. So it makes no sense.
Right. Yeah. In real estate or in business, buying businesses, you're going to do similar amount of work for small and bigger deals. Sometimes it's less work because a bigger deal they have people, they have the accountant, they have the CFO, and they have their financials in order. When you're looking at buying a business, what are some things that you're specifically looking for in terms of like that other people don't see, right? So everybody's kind of looking at what's the price, what's the cost, what's the management team. What are some of the things that you look for that maybe other people don't think to look for?
How do I add value to it? I think that's if I can't add value to it, and there's really two ways to add value. You either can scale it or make it more efficient, or three, scale it, make it more efficient, or both, right? If I can't make it more efficient, if I can't scale it, then why am I buying it? Again, it goes back to the 70,000 versus 700,000. There's, it's still the same amount of time, the same amount of resources. So if I can't add value, even if it's got management in place, even if it has, longevity, stable cash flow, if I don't add value, I'm not looking to buy an annuity, right? For that, I can buy financial instruments or other type of investments, right? I want to take $1 and make it into 3 or 5, right? So it's either by efficiency or scalability or both.
Got it. So let me ask you a personal question, right? So you lend me your phone and I look through the music playlist. What's a song that's probably the most played song on your phone?
um, good question. Probably Guns N' Roses. You Could Be Mine.
Yeah. All right. Guns N' Roses. Nice. All right. So you and I are at a coffee shop or maybe at a bar enjoying your tequila or the competitors, right? And we're having a conversation about deals and the perfect deal comes across the table, right? I know you're a little, business industry agnostic, but you have a heart for this kind of industry or this kind of business. What's that perfect deal for you?
The perfect deal is probably a services business because they're easy to scale. Services businesses, I mean, it's plumbing, electrical, HVAC, pool services, landscaping, home warranty, alarms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So they're very easy to scale. They're less capital intensive, other than maybe trucks. So I've done that many times, and the magic formula is there to scale. Now, here's the thing, Josh. People think scaling is easy. Scaling is not easy. Scaling is hard as hell, right? People think, hey, I'm going to take a business that's doing $1 million in revenue to $5 million in revenue, like it's a walk in the park. No, it's not. You got to hire people. You got to train people. You got to buy new trucks. It's all got to be done, fast, correct, orchestrated, organized with your growth. You don't want to overgrow because you're not gonna have enough cash, you're not gonna have enough people, you're not gonna service that growth. But service industry is the one where the hardest part, I guess, is the human capital, and we suffered that in the past 2 years. Human capital, labor has been very difficult to hire people in general. And so the first time that I've seen that where something, you put out an ad and you get 100 applications. Now you got to bring up your hourly pay or the compensation to track down. That's weighing down a little bit, but really that's what it takes.
Yeah. So what does the future look like for you and your business, right? You're buying businesses, you're investing, it sounds like you're a smart guy, so things are probably going pretty well. Like, what's the future look like? Why, how do you know you're winning and what's that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the future is going to be more helping others, right? Helping others do what I do, in many different fronts. Obviously the more obvious one is helping them buy businesses, right? But then there's the financing. There's a whole world of how you finance, right? So helping them on the finance side, and then there's a whole personal side of it, which, gosh, it's the difference between someone that can and somebody that will, right? Is that mindset. And so there's a lot of work there. So things like that, I think, paying it forward, paying it back, starting obviously with the program we already have, which is teaching people how to buy businesses, without necessarily having experience, without necessarily having to risk their own capital. I think, put more resources into that.
Yeah. So as you're doing that, like, what does a perfect day look like for you?
Perfect day looked like to me, first, the morning is dedicated to understanding how the businesses went the day before, right? So whatever businesses I own at that time, and again, it could be anywhere between 3, 4, 5, or 6, that I know that my business is doing well. And I've got ways to do that, right? I'm plugged in, so to speak. The second part of the day is dedicated to people, to either students, or people that need, non-business type help or advice.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so you and I get to go into the future and have a conversation. We've talked with your younger self, right? Like, hey, be patient, go get some experience before, doubling down and investing in an industry you know nothing about, right? But now we get to go to the future and ask your older self, right? Sitting on the front porch on the rocking chair, sipping on some tequila. You get to ask some advice from your future self. What advice would you ask?
You should have helped people sooner. I think that's probably my biggest regret is, there's been a lot of times where people had great ideas, good people, and they needed that push, whether that push came from capital, whether that push came from mentorship, whether which we now have, but we didn't, of course, for many years. And I just simply didn't have the time or didn't want to take that risk. And I think, I regret there's many particular instances of people that I should have, but didn't,
Yeah.
right? So help people sooner.
Got it. Now, in buying businesses, right? There's a whole process of buying businesses, managing businesses, selling businesses. Out of the whole business life cycle, what's your favorite part?
I'm going to say two here, right? So there's always the adrenaline of the deal, right? No matter, after you do a deal, you're like, I don't want to buy another business again. Wrong. 3 months later, 4 months later, we're already looking and sending out letters of intent, right? So the adrenaline of the deal, but then the triumph of really adding value to the business you bought. So whether it's efficiency or scalability, seeing that you're making a dollar turn into three, seeing that you're able to employ more people, seeing that your reach is bigger, there's a big sense of satisfaction in that. You see it in your team, you see it in the employees. They want to be in that team, right? There's a huge sense of personal satisfaction, financially and personally.
Well, say that last part again.
Financially and personally.
Yeah, got it. So one of the, let's just say you and I did a big deal together, right? It was just a massive deal, big home run, and we're going to go have fun or go celebrate in some way. How do you celebrate?
Bring the families. I bring my wife. Let's go out to dinner. Let's go out with your family as well. That's the best way to celebrate is to be with your family.
Yeah, very cool. Now, how many kids do you have now?
2 daughters.
2 daughters. All right. So where do you think either of them are going to be entrepreneur or investor or one day business acquirer?
Yeah. I hope they do what makes them happy. They've seen their father. They joke about all the different businesses that they've seen, as they've grown. But at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever makes them happy. That's what's going to make me happy. So whether it's business, whether it's law, whether it's a doctor, whether it's non-for-profit, whether it's dance, if it fulfills them, that's, what can a father ask for?
Yeah.
And their daughter's happiness.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, tell us about, you said something that's really important to you now and is your driver is helping other people, right? Through mentorship and coaching and training, right? Tell us about Business Action Now and what you guys are doing over there or your coaching business. Kind of give us an idea of what that looks like to work with you.
Sure. So we have a program that's kind of evolved. We launched it in 2.5 years ago. It's a coaching program, and it has a course. It's an extremely comprehensive course where we before you even start the core of the course, so buying, how to the whole journey of buying a business, we make sure that you're financially, what you need to know from a financial standpoint, so there's a whole module on income statement and earnings, and just so everybody kind of comes out of the gate with the same knowledge, right? Independent of your knowledge prior. We talk about psychology a lot. Buying a business, a lot of people think it's science, it's art, it's all art. So talking to a baby boomer who wants to sell the business, if you don't talk to that person the right way and hit the right buttons and understand what their drivers are, it's going to be very hard for them to see you as a prospective buyer. So we talk a lot about the psychology of the seller. We talk about a lot about the psychology of the business broker. We talk a lot about the psychology and the tendencies of the small business space to get you very prepared for the course. And then it's then it's just, 8 steps. You start sourcing deals, you start talking to sellers, you start valuing them, you start structuring the LOI, you start raising capital, you start doing the due diligence, you go into the legal part, you close, and what do you do the first 90 to 100 days? So the course is all about, it gets you right into the, this is what you do from day one all the way to you buy a business, right? And so there's coaching. We have three types of offers. We have just the course alone that doesn't have any coaching. You have the course plus group coaching, which is a 10-week program with group coaching is with me. And then you have one-on-one coaching, which is a 12-week program, and it's one-on-one coaching with me.
Yeah. So who would that be a good fit for? So we have a bunch of deal makers in the audience. Like, who's the ideal client for, working with you?
A lot of freelancers, a lot of people that have a corporate job who really want to try entrepreneurship. There's no other easier way than have someone teach you a proven method. There's people that have retired, but have all the energy and the knowledge in the world, and they have time. But I'll tell you something, Josh. Anyone can buy a business. There's that mindset out there that if I don't have money, I can't. That's a lie. That's a myth. We've had waiters buy businesses, right? We've had hair salonists buy businesses. We've had people with bad credit buy businesses. So all the ifs and buts that you can come into your mind, we've seen it, and people have gone through the journey. Sure, it's a little harder than others, but it's absolutely doable, right?
Yeah, super cool. So for the deal makers out there, where's a good place for them to connect with you and do a deal with you?
They can go to businessactionnow.com or arturohenriquez.com. Send me a message. Maybe reference this podcast, reference you, and then I'll get in touch with them. Absolutely.
Sounds good. What questions should I have asked you on this interview that maybe I screwed up and I didn't ask you and that we probably should have talked about?
The one question that people normally don't ask me is what you have asked me, which is what advice would I give myself early on, right? And I think we addressed it. I think that's the biggest thing is don't run before you walk, right? Meaning get some experience. So if people are out there, there's a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old that's fresh out of college or skipped college, but he has absolutely no idea what they're doing, and they want to just dive head deep into buying a business. I would caution them, because they're going to put their life savings, they're going to put their time, their effort into something that they have no context or perspective in all aspects of running a business. Not even buying a business, is running a business. So I think you covered. I think that's the number one advice it's been pretty constant in the past 20 years that I've given people.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Arturo, man, thanks for coming on the show today and sharing your story. And man, I would love to try some of that tequila sometime with you. Next time I'm in Texas, I'll hit you up and we'll hang out, go out to dinner. Try it out. Yeah, man. So ladies and gentlemen listening in, fellow deal makers, reach out to our guests. Say thanks for being on the show. Find a way to connect with them and do a deal with them. That's the purpose and mission of the show, is to connect deals and deal makers. If you're working on a deal yourself or looking for a deal, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, and maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See ya.